Coming up on this episode of Nintendo Cartridge Society, you tell the story, blah, blah, blah. StarTropics, blah, blah, blah. Zoda's Revenge, blah, blah. It's dangerous to go alone, so the Nintendo Cartridge Society goes with you. Welcome to Nintendo Cartridge Society. My name is Patrick Ellers, and I am joined, as always, by my co-host, Mark Mitchell. Mark, how's it going?
It's going really good. I am really excited to hit this point in Retro Month because this is a game I'm really excited to talk about.
Oh, this is a game you're really excited to talk about.
Yeah, because I had never really experienced it before.
We will get into our various levels of experience with it before. Once we start talking about it. Of course, today we are talking about Zoda's Revenge, StarTropics 2. But before we get into that, just a little lay of the land, right? For what's left of Retro Month. Not much.
No, the last weird sequel we're going to be talking about is Castlevania 2 Simon's Quest next week.
Yes, and you can find it on both the 3DS and the Wii U Virtual Console, so that one you should be able to play along with, even though we know full well no one was able to play along with us on Zoda's Revenge.
And if you have been playing along or played some of the games that we talked about the past couple of weeks, definitely shoot us an email. We'd love to hear what you think.
Right, and you can send that email to Nintendo Cartridge Society at gmail.com. Another thing you can do with that email address, you can try to borrow my copy of Sonic Forces. All you have to do is send me your mailing address to Nintendo Cartridge Society at gmail.com, and I send you my copy of this game on Switch, and you can play it for as long as you like, and then send it back.
No risk other than contaminating your house with a copy of Sonic Forces.
Right. I mean, it's a real no risk, no rewards situation.
That's right. Net neutral.
That's right. Mark, I believe we have a debug.
Yes, I'm sad to announce that we have a debug on my account, but I'm glad to be able to clear this up.
I tried to debug it in the moment.
You were a hero, like jumping in front of this bullet,
mm-hmm.
but I pushed you out of the way and took it anyways. Basically,
yeah.
At the end of last week's episode, when we were talking about Super Mario Land 2, 6 Golden Coins, I said that, hey, there's a DX version of this game. Similar to Link's Awakening DX that is in color and can be played on your Game Boy Color.
And I said, isn't that just a ROM hack?
And I was like, ha, 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 ha. No, you idiot.
And then Mark took me outside to where there was a puddle, like a muddy puddle, and he stuck my face in it.
But then as I was doing that, with one hand I was holding Patrick down.
Right.
With the other hand, I pulled my phone out of my back
Playing
pocket.
a piano?
And yes, I played a little piano, and I put the piano aside. I picked up my phone that was sitting on top of the piano,
right?
And I looked up Super Mario Land 2 DX, and to my horror, found out that it was, in fact, just a fan ROM, not a real thing that doesn't it exists, but
right, it's not a sanctioned thing.
Yeah.
Which means that Nintendo has not ever revisited this thing.
That's right.
Which, come on, it's part of your legacy.
It's better than Super Mario Land.
Yes, it is. For whatever reason, there are so many names of games, and I feel very comfortable about like which game has which name. I still get turned around in my head. The worlds, the lands, the galaxies, the everything. It all just turns me around a little bit.
Yeah, it feels like there's like 5 or 6 titles that they're all just shuffling around.
Yeah, and someday we're just going to be playing Land World Galaxy New.
Mario?
Mario! All right, Mark, let's get into the main topic of the week. Let's talk about Zoda's Revenge, StarTropics 2. Released in 1994
for the NES.
For the NES.
So the Super Nintendo had been out for 3 years at that point.
That's right. It is the second to last first-party game to be released for the hardware, the last one being Wario's Woods. Yeah, what a weird old game that we're playing.
So, yeah, it's like double weird because StarTropics on his own
Yes.
is a weird franchise of 2 games,
Yes.
and this one is fairly different from the original StarTropics on top of it.
Yeah, I mean, I would say that it fits our pattern of weird sequel kind of the least. That all the rest of them are here's an established first game, and the second one is a radical departure. I would say that this is like some of the presentation is upped, and like Mike's mobility, your character's mobility is increased. But by and large, it's the same kind of game. If you compare Zelda to Zelda 2, you could argue they're not even the same kind of game. But these, StarTropics and StarTropics 2 feel at least like the sequeling makes sense to me.
Yeah, I can see that. I feel like we should start at the beginning and just be like, what's a StarTropics?
What's a StarTropics? A StarTropics features Mike Jones. You play as Mike Jones, a baseball playing kid
From Seattle.
Nintendo of America, based in Seattle. I don't think that's any coincidence. And he's got an uncle, Dr. Stephen Jones, who is a tropical archaeologist. So it's an archaeologist named Dr. Jones. I'm not saying Nintendo's stealing directly from Indiana Jones, but Nintendo's stealing directly from Indiana Jones in this regard.
In the first game, you're on a tropical island looking for your uncle.
That's right. Your uncle has invited you to go out there and visit him. You somehow make it to an island that he's been living with like the natives for a while. And then he sends you off on this wild goose chase that eventually leads you to all these different islands, and then eventually to some aliens. And the aliens, it turns out, are in some intergalactic war with this creature called Zoda. And yes, you spend 90% of the game on tropical islands in like caves and stuff, and then the last chapter of the game, it's like, now you're on a spaceship. It tonally takes a real hard turn towards the end.
Yeah, so it's really weird that, to me, that StarTropics 2 features Zoda up front in the title.
Right, whereas Zoda is, yes, he's before StarTropics 2. It is Zoda's Revenge, subtitle StarTropics 2.
And Zoda is, not the most memorable part of the first StarTropics.
No, he's arguably not the most memorable part of the second StarTropics, right?
Yeah, for sure.
So, okay, have we covered the original StarTropics enough? Maybe not. The original StarTropics kind of alternates between 2 basic gameplay styles, and they are both like an overhead perspective, which is a little strange.
Yeah, it's an iteration on the original Zelda, the original Legend of Zelda.
Kind of, yeah. I would say so. The dungeons feel like the original Legend of Zelda,
except you can jump.
And so there's nightmarish platforming in some of these things.
But you're locked to a grid when you're jumping in the first game.
In the original StarTropics, yeah. But there's also like an overworld, and the overworld feels more like the original Final Fantasy, where like this in both versions of the game, you're locked to a grid, and you're sort of exploring the area that will have these like little bits of dungeon, or there are villages where you're talking to people and like finding weapons and heart containers and stuff like that.
Yeah, that's pretty much
That's it, right?
That's pretty much StarTropics.
That's pretty much StarTropics. The first game is obtuse and difficult, right?
Yeah, it famously has a puzzle that can only be solved by, in the instruction manual, there's like a piece of paper that was supposed to be a letter from Dr. Jones, and you dipped it in water to reveal a code that would let you continue on.
Now, presumably this was to stop piracy, right?
Maybe. That makes total sense. I think also around this time, Nintendo was in a war with Blockbuster over game rentals. And so I can imagine that if StarTropics was a game that you rented and you made it that far, without the internet, I don't know exactly how you would proceed.
Thing is, it's not that far at all. It's the end of the first chapter that they ask you for that 3-digit password, and it's like there's like a canonical reason you're like activating the submarine or whatever. But yeah, it's kind of a crappy thing. It's exactly like in Metal Gear Solid. There's a part of the game where it refers you to a frequency that's listed on the back of the box. Like that's what it says in the back on the back of the box, and you have to go to your CD-ROM that had the Metal Gear Solid discs in it and actually see it, so you could like dial in to get Meryl's codec. But like, that's such a weird thing.
Yeah, you definitely would not do something like that nowadays.
No, well, because everyone would just look it up. Right.
Zoda's Revenge, StarTropics 2, is like StarTropics, but more of it in every way possible.
Yeah, in every conceivable way. I guess this is one thing that we didn't mention about the original StarTropics, is that it has a sense of humor. Sometimes it's like a pretty cheesy, like dad caliber sense of humor.
Well, StarTropics was developed in Japan with a Western audience in mind. Like, I don't think either of the StarTropics games ever were released in Japan.
That would make sense to me.
At all. And so it's very, like, especially the second game, there's a little bit of, like, a Bill and Ted-esque, like, late 80s, early 90s sense of, like, radical and, like, whoa.
Yeah. A little, like, early Ninja Turtles kind of tubular. Yeah, but I mean, by, like, 94, isn't that getting kind of, like, played out and stale?
Well, I mean... to your point, like, definitely the dad humor version of all of this.
Of course, right. Yeah, there's not a whiff of authenticity about this game's humor or its identity. But so that, I feel like, is also present in Zoda's Revenge, in either the same capacity or an even greater capacity than in the original.
I feel like kind of maybe in a greater capacity, because the story is... I don't know, like, more presentational this time.
Yeah.
Like, you get, like, those big pictures of Mike, and he's, like, breaking the fourth wall at the beginning, talking to you.
Oh, that is true.
And
Mike
like,
does break the fourth wall. And the MacGuffins that you're chasing after are literally, they don't call them this, but they are the Tetraminos from Tetris, like the Tetris blocks. They call them blocks, but they're all in the shapes of the Tetris blocks. So, like, yeah, it is a little bit more like winking and knowing and like basing its story on its humor, for sure. So what was your experience of this game or StarTropics but before we started playing today?
Yeah, I had played some StarTropics, most recently with the NES Classic Edition. It was released there. I had never played Zoda's Revenge.
Never even touched it.
No.
Zoda's Revenge was a game that I like kind of fetishized as a kid, because I really liked the original StarTropics. I had played through it a bunch of times, had beaten it, and then I think I either got or rented Zoda's Revenge even later than when it came out. So, I was probably playing it in like 95, 96, something like that, and got to a point not that far in the game where I was like, that's it. I can't like grind my way through this anymore. I don't have the patience that I did when I was a younger child, and kind of abandoned it. So like it's a little bit of a white whale for me, that like I know Mark and I did not finish the game today. When we sat down to play it, we put about 5 hours in, which I feel like is giving it a good old college try.
And we are like 2 dungeons away from finishing it.
Right, but those are 2 dungeons we did not want to put the effort in.
No, we were pulling our hair out a little bit by the end because we were playing it on the Wii Virtual Console, and there are no save states in the Wii Virtual Console.
Which, I mean, let's just pause on that for a moment. The Wii had great Virtual Console. We were all very excited about it. It played NES games, with a fidelity that blah 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 blah. There are no save states.
There are no save states, which really would have made this experience a lot more enjoyable for reasons that we will get into. But first, I think we should talk about like the plot of Zoda's Revenge.
Sure. So the plot of Zoda's Revenge starts off with Mike, everyone's favorite Southpaw reliever. Reliever? Yes.
Southpaw reliever.
How he identifies himself. He's addressing you, the player, and he's kind of like, hey, do you remember my uncle, Dr. Jones?
And he looks like Archie.
He does look like Archie.
He has red hair, freckles.
Yeah, hair's like kind of sticking up in the front. And so you can either say yes or no, and he will either way. He basically tells you who his uncle is again, and then suddenly we get a telepathic message from Micah, who is one of the one of the good guy aliens from the original StarTropics. And what does she say, Mark? I'm trying to remember. Piecing this together,
like, I am a cat, I am a rat, or something like that.
Like what was it a cat I saw? Was it a rat I saw?
Yes, that's what it was.
That's like a message from her father, who's the king of the good aliens. And so you take this vision back to your uncle, Dr. Jones, who is studying something. And he's like, was it a cat I saw? Was it a rat I saw? And then he just says it backwards, which is the same thing. They're palindromes. Was it a cat I saw? Was it a rat I saw? So they determined that means that they should read some book they have.
Some like magic spell that the good alien king had told them about. So he's like, go get your Oxford encyclopedia, basically.
Right.
I can't remember, like World Book or something. I can't remember what they call it. And then they say the magic words backwards.
Right. There's Zatanna at this point, right? Just saying things backwards and makes it magic.
And then Mike falls through some portal of space and time and ends up in
some prehistoric Ice Age era. There are cavemen carving things onto walls, and there you travel to their settlement, and they tell you that their children have been kidnapped by a monster called Yum Yum.
And that's basically the premise of this game, is that each time you go to one of these lands, there's like this prehistoric one, Egypt, the Old West, Sherlock Holmes.
Places in history. Sherlock Holmes.
Transylvania. And then there's like a dungeon in each of them. At the end, you get another Tetris piece, and just move on to the next one.
Yeah, I mean the second you find the block, the Tetris piece, it triggers a cutscene of Mike reading this thing and tumbling through space and time to another location.
And I did like this part of it. I think it's an improvement on StarTropics, because StarTropics, for the most part, is set on a tropical island, and it just feels a little samey after a while.
Totally, yeah.
And while this one has enemies shared between the different lands, and it also has like textures and stuff, like other graphical parts that it shares between them, it does feel distinct.
Absolutely. And honestly, I was a little bit surprised at the enemy variety. There are a lot of different kind of enemies in this game. And each one is more frustrating to fight than the last.
So here's the thing, is StarTropics 2 is really unforgiving, I would say.
Yeah, it is unforgiving in its combat and in its platforming, and just generally speaking, unforgiving. There are few checkpoints in any of these dungeons. And you have 3 lives, and when you lose those 3 lives, you got to do the whole dungeon all over again.
And 1-ups are scarce.
Yep.
The only way that you can regain health is finding potions in dungeons,
or
enemies will occasionally, very, very occasionally, so occasionally that in the 6 hours we were playing this, I forgot they did it.
I think a couple times you forgot.
When you kill an enemy, they will maybe drop a star.
Right.
And when you pick up 5 stars in a dungeon, because anytime you leave a dungeon, it all resets. Anytime you get 5 stars, you get 1 heart back.
Now, just for reference here, you start the game with 6 hearts. So, and then every time you get a Tetris block, it increases that by 1. And there are other times that you can find big heart container pieces or big heart containers to increase your thing. So by the time we stopped playing, I think we had 14 hearts. And so if we are, and when you die and come back, it doesn't start you with full life. It starts you with just a fraction of it, maybe half, maybe less. But if we wanted to fill up our hearts, we'd have to collect 50 stars. And they're very rarely dropped by enemies.
And when you do pick up health potions, they don't fill you up either.
No, it's like 5 or 6 hearts that it gives you. And there's no, like, I guess when you beat a level, it restores your hearts to full. But is that it?
That's pretty much it.
When you pick up a new heart container as well?
The other thing that makes it really difficult is most games, when you get hit by an enemy, you have a moment of invincibility.
Yes.
There is not that.
StarTropics.
In StarTropics
no,
2.
it affords you no such moment of invincibility to like recover or even get away.
So if an enemy like shares your space,
Yes.
like runs into you
and stays there for a second,
then you just get wiped out completely.
And a lot of these enemies, they've got movement patterns that are totally random. So, like, if you find yourself occupying a square with an enemy that has just hurt you, obviously your goal is going to be to move away to another square. There's a 1 in 4 chance you're moving to the same square as that enemy. So, like, there were many times where we were fighting kind of normal, not tough enemies where they just got 5 hits on us over the course of a second.
Yeah, it's a little bit like Dark Souls in that way, where in Dark Souls, even the very easy enemies can be devastating if you're not careful.
Yes.
And that's exactly how it is here.
Except the thing is, I feel like it's not even about being careful. It's just like, well, sometimes you get screwed by these things.
That's true. In Dark Souls, one of those beginning enemies, you maybe mess up a counter or something like that.
Yeah.
And so you become vulnerable. In this one, they can literally just randomly move into the space you're standing.
Yeah. Yes. The whole thing is very tricky, and it was a source of a lot of frustration for us.
Yeah, I feel like between the checkpoints and the lack of checkpoints, the lack of healing items, and the lack of invincibility.
Yeah.
Then it just became really, really frustrating.
Yeah.
In a way that kind of, I don't know, like, I enjoyed the game.
I did too. But it is with a huge caveat of like, I think I enjoy it more abstractly than I actually do playing it. Like, okay, so we mentioned that there's like some platforming in the game too, and that is also unforgiving, right? When you fall into a pit, you die. You lose life, and you go back to wherever you were last.
When you fall into water,
yes,
you die completely.
Yes, when you fall onto spikes, you die completely. This is just like what we were talking about last week with Zelda 2, 2 weeks ago?
2 weeks ago.
2 weeks ago with Zelda 2. That, you should fall into a pit, lose 1 heart, and like go back to the beginning of the room. That's what it should be. The Link to the Past figured it out. But these two for whatever reason, the NES was like, no, you fall in a pit, you die. Those are the rules. We don't want to mess up the rules. So this game, the platforming, difficult. And when you mess it up, you die. The thing that makes this platforming so much more difficult than the platforming in the first StarTropics is that the first one snapped you to a grid, right? So, you're on just a very obvious grid, and when you're going to move, you move 1 space forward. You know exactly how far Mike jumps, and you know exactly in what direction Mike is going to jump. This game is like, you know what? We don't want the grid anymore. Mike can move diagonally. He can be halfway between 1 square and the other. But all the platforming is still presented on a very strict grid. So it's like the game keeps all of the rigidity of its design, but the character doesn't, which makes you just too mobile.
Like even the enemies are pretty much on a grid.
Yes.
They don't really move diagonally, but the fact that it also almost makes it harder that you can.
Yes.
Because it's difficult to line up your shots.
It's really tough to line up your shots.
You might be a little bit off the axis of where like the enemy's hit box is.
Yeah. And then there are these rafts. Mark,
the bane.
Why don't you tell us about rafts
of our playthrough? So they're moving slowly through the water, normally back and forth, and you have to jump onto them as they're moving, and then jump off of them onto whatever like platform you're trying to get to.
Yes.
And so many times I misjudged how close I was to the edge
and just walked right off the raft.
Yeah.
Because that's the other thing. any other water's edge in this game, it won't allow you to walk off of. You can walk right up to it, and then if you force Mike to jump into it, then he will, and he'll die. But this, if you like get too close to the edge of a raft, he's just gonna fall off, and then his little ghost spirit is gonna like fly away, and you lose a life.
That sort of frustration, I feel like, there were two places where it really hit us hard.
Yeah.
One in the Leonardo da Vinci dungeon.
Okay, well, let's talk about the setup to this one though.
Okay.
So you travel to Venice, and you stumble into Da Vinci's studio?
Yes.
Laboratory?
I think studio.
Okay. And Da Vinci's not there, but there is a statue, or it's just like a blob of concrete or something. And you hear a voice from inside it being like, "I can't move." And you're like, "Oh, okay, I better help chisel this guy out." So you go into a dungeon, and the dungeon is all traps. No enemies that you have to fight in there. But these traps, Mark, these traps.
It's basically the jumping platforming that we hate on moving air rafts, which we hate,
right?
Followed by this puzzle where there are balls moving all around the room, and when you hit them, they're either going left and right or up and down. And when you hit them, they change direction, and you're trying to get all of them into a hole.
Right. But if the ball hits you when you make it change direction, you take damage. This was the one where I mean, usually it's like I had the controller and I would, get through in like one set of lives, or you would have the controller and you would get through in one set of lives. When we got to this, you did a couple sets of lives, I did a couple sets of lives, and eventually we got through it.
Yeah.
But like, did you feel good when we were done with it? Were you like, I mean,
I felt relief.
I felt relief too, but I wasn't like, yeah, I'm so like.
Yeah, I didn't feel accomplished.
No,
for sure.
Definitely did not feel accomplished.
But so that was annoying because I misjudged some of those jumps a ton of times.
It's hard. They're really difficult to judge.
And then the other time when I found these like raft falling into water mechanics to be really annoying was whatever dungeon it was with Zoda X comes down and makes this big brain thing in the center.
Oh yes.
And you have these appearing and disappearing platforms that are going counterclockwise, and you have to like move through the platforms and shoot this guy.
Yeah. So this is a boss that's just like, it looks like a brain on a platform in like the middle of a lake, and it's like Mark described, platforms that appear and then disappear that just sort of like go around him, and we got to a point where it's just like, okay, there's one platform where I know I'll have a couple seconds to like hit him with some of these knives or whatever we have to throw, and then I'm just gonna finish the circle of platforms and then start it again, which means it's not so much difficult as it is just like annoying. They had to like keep doing the same thing again. And when you beat that boss, then he reveals like a tile that is under him that you need to go and stomp on. So you've got to like go and do like one more circuit of the thing to like get all the way around and like open the door and get out.
Yeah, there's a lot of just like silly decisions in the design of this game. Like in order to open any chest, you have to find a tile in the room that when you step on it, it lights up. But stepping on it isn't enough. Once you find the one that is the correct tile, you have to return to it and jump on it.
Right. And that will cause an orb to appear in the room. You have to go and touch that orb, and then the chest will open.
So it's a lot of just like busy work that I don't really know adds anything to it. And that's kind of how I feel about the bosses in this game.
Yeah.
I think aesthetically they're cool. They're all pretty varied.
Mm-hmm.
But the mechanics are pretty much the same. They're usually on like the other side of a chasm.
They are always on the other side of a chasm.
There's a couple that aren't, like the big scorpion thingy and like stuff like that. But that's how a lot of them are, is like a boss is on the other side of a chasm. They're shooting two types of projectiles at you. Usually it's like one that like flares out.
Yeah, just sort of like fans out.
And Then the other one is a more powerful, like, direct strike that if you're in its way, it's pretty close to a 1 or 2 hit kill.
Right, or some kind of area effect. Like there was one that just made like a ring of fire appear around you, and you had to just not bump into it.
And then you're just like shooting projectiles across the chasm. I mean, and that's pretty much
the game.
Yeah.
I mean, it is weird. It feels like you were saying that the bosses all look different but kind of feel the same. I think the same can be said of the weapons. You get psychic powers in this game. Psychic powers, which
first from a monkey.
Right, first from a monkey, then from a donkey.
The donkey, of course, has the most powerful psychic powers.
I mean, we don't know. We didn't finish the game. There may be a more powerful psychic than the donkey. We don't, Mark. We just don't know.
We just don't know.
But the psychic powers really just take the form of like Mike throwing a little like piece of magic or like a little star or something, which is exactly how he uses the axe that you get in the prehistoric world, or the knife that you get from Cleopatra, or the katana that you get from Leonardo. Like all of these weapons, you get all of these weapons and you get all of these powers, and every single one of them is just a different projectile that doesn't travel in a different way, that doesn't, like, there isn't one that's like faster than the others. Like there's a difference in range and in like damage dealt.
Later in the game you get additional like sub weapons, like I don't know, like the killer frisbee thing.
Yeah, but
and that kind of like fans out.
No, the killer frisbee was just a normal like straightforward shot. The one that like fanned out a little bit was the like spiky ball in Transylvania. But Transylvania is chapter 7 of 9. So like, you have to get pretty deep in this game until you have an item or a weapon that behaves even remotely different from the rest of them, which is just kind of disappointing. Like you think about how in Zelda, the sword feels different from arrows, feels different from a boomerang, feels different from, like the magic like staffs that you have in Link to the Past. None of these feel different. They all the attacks are exactly the same. And you never really given anything that changes Mike's mobility. He's never going to like jump further or run faster or climb anything or whatever. His he feels very static.
I think for me, Zoda's Revenge is a lot like Zelda 2, where I think Zelda 2 had a ton of interesting ideas, and I think Zoda's Revenge really is a positive iteration in a lot of ways on the original StarTropics, but it needs more refinement for it to be like actually a fun experience.
Yeah, and I mean, part of that is that we're looking at it through a 2019 lens. Like a lot of games from 1994 aren't going to look super great when viewed through like our modern conveniences of video games. But yeah, I mean, I totally agree that there are a lot of good ideas in here and a lot of like cute or fun execution, but it's just like it comes together as a frustrating package.
Yeah, I wish that we were getting like a Samus Returns-esque remake of Zoda's Revenge.
Yeah, that would be great. I mean, I do think, look, we have asked this question of all the other weird retro sequels that we've talked about. The question is normally, is there something from this game that you would like to see in modern blank games? Zelda, Mario, StarTropics.
This was the end of the line for StarTropics.
This was the end of the second stop and the end of the line for StarTropics. And it doesn't seem likely that we'll ever see another StarTropics game, right? Like,
no, do you remember? I feel like before the Wii U was announced, one of the favorite rumors that were going around at the time was that Retro was working on a StarTropics reboot.
I mean, did I start that rumor? Because it sounds like something I want more than anything.
But yeah, I mean, the fact that StarTropics neither game was ever released in Japan, and that neither game is very well remembered. Zoda's Revenge could not have sold very well, releasing in 1994.
Yeah. I mean, the first one is on the NES Classic Edition, which is in a lot of homes right now, and I'm sure is a lot of people's first sort of exposure to it.
But not on the Famicom Mini.
Yeah, that's right. And it's also not on the NES Switch Online service. And Zoda's Revenge will probably never be up there. as discussed, Zoda's Revenge isn't even on the like current generation virtual consoles of Wii U or 3DS. So like, I don't know. It's even a little bit weird to me that it was available on the Wii's virtual console.
Well, I'm actually a little bit for it not being on Nintendo Switch Online. Like, I'd rather have this game on there than some of the other ones
Sure.
that have come up already.
Mm-hmm.
Because I don't think it's a bad game. I just think it's not very polished.
It is also a game that, as discussed many times now, would be better with save states.
Yeah. Yes. Oh my gosh. That alone is a reason to put it on the NES Switch Online.
So you hear that, Nintendo? Do it. Is there anything else that we want to talk about in terms of like the worlds that it takes you to, or any of like the? Because like I think time travel is a fun, mechanic. If even if it allows nothing more than just like, here's a dinosaur setting, here's a Transylvania setting. I just think it's so neat and not really like anything that we saw at that time. Like I was even getting kind of flashes of Chrono Trigger during like the scenes where Mike is falling through the wormhole into a new time.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, one of the things that would have been cool is if there had been more of that open world aspect to it.
Yeah.
Everything is pretty linear.
Yeah. When you get into a new time, like you're basically in what in the Sherlock times, you're just like on a single London city street, and like there are people there for you to talk to, but it becomes obvious pretty quick that like no one's saying anything interesting or of any, like there's nothing to find. Exploration is not rewarded in this game.
Yeah, you can't open doors.
Right. Yeah. A door has to be open for Mike to go into it. And it is lacking in a lot of ways. I mean, I do think that for either of these games to be like presentable for the modern era, they would need like a full-on Samus Returns style remake to really, like keep the story-ish intact, but kind of overhaul everything else.
Yeah. I guess like I just wish that StarTropics hadn't come to an end, because I think a Super Nintendo version of this could have been really cool.
Yeah, you think like somewhere around 1997 they would have figured it out?
Maybe. Or they at least would have gotten closer. I feel like it's like trying to get to infinity.
Yeah,
because
sure.
these StarTropics games, they were always kind of made by not the B tier, but just a weird
C tier?
just a weird group of Nintendo developers. Like it was like the Punch-Out people.
Yeah.
They were mostly focused on hardware and occasionally made games. And so I don't know that they ever would have like had the polish of a Link to the Past or something like that.
Yeah.
But I think they definitely would have kept iterating in the right direction, because we definitely see that from StarTropics to StarTropics 2.
And it definitely seems like that's what kills it. Like 2 games on the NES and then nothing in the Super Nintendo era, and it's like, yeah, okay, we're done with that. That's it. Like that's why we don't see any Ice Climbers, like that it doesn't exist as a game franchise now. That's why. Duck Hunt, same thing. Yeah, it's sad to me.
But yeah, I put one of these fighters in Smash.
Put one of these. Look, do we want to see Mike? Maybe. Do we want to see Zoda? Absolutely. Do we want to see Sherlock Holmes?
Yes. Zoda's the new Ridley.
Zoda is the new Ridley. You heard it here first. Okay, Mark, let's close out this discussion. I would love to know if anyone else was able to play this game
or had ever played it.
Yeah, and if so, if you have any experience, you can write into us at Nintendo Cartridge Society at gmail.com and tell us what you think. Do you like this game? Are Mark and I big baby boys who weren't able to just like pull ourselves together and beat this game?
Well, I mean, Patrick, I think we both would admit that we're big baby boys.
I don't know that I want to go down this road with you, Mark.
And next week we're going to be checking out Castlevania 2: Simon's Quest.
That's right. I hope we will finish that one. That's another notoriously difficult and obtuse game, but we're going to use save states and a walkthrough.
Oh, baby.
Oh, baby. If you enjoy this episode of Nintendo Cartridge Society, please rate, review, and subscribe on Apple Podcasts. You can share the episode on Facebook or Twitter or wherever you share things. That helps us out a bunch. On Twitter, I'm at Patrick_Ellers. Mark is at MKE Mitchell, and the show is at Nin Cart Society. We also have a Facebook page, which is just Nintendo Cartridge Society. Olivia Duncan made our logo. Our theme music is provided by 8-Bit Betty. You can get more of his music by going to 8bitbetty.com or by listening right now. For my co-host, Mark Mitchell, this is Patrick Ellers, admitting that he's a big baby boy, and saying thanks for listening.
Campfire.